We have a very unique session coming up. This is one of the new sessions that we are trying out at Eyecelerator, which is to actually go in depth with a business school type case study of companies that have achieved success but gone on an odyssey voyage through all kinds of things in order to get there, which is the standard way companies become successful, is to have some near-death experiences. And we debated a lot about, for the inaugural one, which company to do. And there was no question that Glaukos came out, for so many reasons that you'll hear about, as really being an ideal first case study. But the idea is here, we're going to try to do this at each meeting and pick out a company that will have some experiences that will really be help everyone here in the audience to move forward any innovations that they're involved with. There wasn't much debate about the moderator for this. We debated the company, but by popular request, even by our CEO, Tom Burns, the one and only Jim Mazzo will moderate what we hope will be an entertaining session. And I will turn it over to Jim. It's all yours.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you for taking my introduction, Gil. That was very nice of you. So it's called Profiles in Courage. I actually think I should be the Profile in Courage because I'm going to have to manage this group for the next 45 minutes. So give me the round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. It's the only way I get it done, Burnsy. That's the only way I can get it done. So it's really a privilege, and you're going to see throughout today, I'm going to be bringing people up because really the company's been in stages of growth to from the beginning to where we are today. So as we're doing that, I'm going to ask several people to keep joining us till we fill up all these lovely chairs. But of course, in order to create something, you have to have a vision to start with something. And so it's my honor to have two very good people, two very good friends up here with Bill Link and Tom Burns, who basically started the vision, created the idea, and so I'm going to hit them first with the questions before I bring my next round of guests up. So I'm going to go right with you, Tommy. Oh, sorry, I got to go. Tom, sorry. What was the initial beginning of Glaukos, and how was the company founded?
Yeah, so Glaukos had, I think, a very altruistic beginning. There's a young man, 18 years old, who presented with pigmentary glaucoma to Dr. Rick Hill at University of California, Irvine. He'd been losing vision in both eyes, and Rick Hill recommended bilateral trabeculectomies. Well, this patient's father happened to be a venture capitalist in Orange County who invested in a number of cardiovascular companies, and he challenged Rick and said, there has to be a better way to treat my son than this draconian late-stage filtration procedure. And Rick Hill said, I have a better way, but no one will listen to me. My idea is to take a device to be able to bypass the obstructed trabecular meshwork, reestablish physiologic outflow, and be able to reduce pressure to manage glaucoma. So this venture capitalist became enticed, and they contacted a gentleman named Maury Garib, who was vice provost at Caltech University. He's also ran JPL that put the rover onto Mars. And he happened to be an aficionado in fluid mechanics. So as the mythology goes, they got together, they met at an Italian restaurant, they turned the back of a menu over and they started to draw up schematics of what this device could look like and started to put down a few patents. And then they put a little seed capital in and then founded Glaukos. So these are the people that deserve the credit.
So it's true an Italian founded Glaukos.
What was done at an Italian restaurant.
Oh, shoot. I was so close. So Bill, you obviously did two critical things. One, recruit the young man to your left and invest. Both, as we heard today, probably equal value. You got to have the right talent and you got to have the capital behind it. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's, again, quite a journey. And it was early in my venture career. So I had been in venture capital just 2 or 3 years at the time. And Olaf Berkheim, the fellow whose son had the glaucoma, and he'd met Rick Hill and so forth, he approached me for funding. And I said, well, what's your project? And he said, oh, it's for late-stage glaucoma patients, and it's a trabeculectomy and this and that. I said, well, no, thank you. You know, that's too high in morbidity, and the market's too small. These are end-stage patients, and so that can't, you know, that won't work, you know, as a venture investment. And he said, well, you're wrong. And I loved it, you know, in a way. He was not afraid to take me on. And then he started to sketch out that this was truly different. You know, later, you know, we declared it to be minimally invasive glaucoma surgery, but at that time, it was on pencil and paper. And the rusty engineer in me said, oh, maybe this could work. And so I tried to open my mind and say, okay, well, let me learn more about it and this and that. And that led to me getting aligned with the need was there, and the opportunity to jump forward from a technology and a solution standpoint. So that, and Versant, you know, led the first round of small investment there to get the project started. And then as we made some headway, we needed leadership and tenacity. Tom and I had worked together for an extended period. At that time, he actually after we sold Chiron Vision to Bausch & Lomb, he was at Bausch for a while. Then he actually transitioned back, and he worked together in the venture field. And so we even had a chance to re-engage for a while. He then moved to the East Coast, left me, and then my sense was that he could be the right person that understands the field so well, could provide leadership, and we could build the team. And so I remember reaching out, Tom, to you, seeing if you would be open to relocating to the West Coast. And one thing led to another, and we did it.
What year was that, Bill?
Oh, probably in 23 or 4?
It was 2002.
02.
Yeah.
02.
So I think that's very important that you think about this journey, because sometimes we forget, but this is 2002 when this journey started. So obviously, Bill and Tom, you needed to start getting other people on your board. You needed to start getting people to fill out your team. And I'd like to bring some of those individuals up. I'd like Chris Calcaterra, Dave Hafner, and Gil Kliman to come up, because they're kind of filling out the next round. So as they're coming up, Tom, what was kind of the impetus to say yes? What got you to say yes?
Well, I think Bill was a big reason why I said yes. I was able to help build Chiron Vision with him in the 1990s, and again, then it transitioned over to Versant Fencers. But I will tell you, I had the same feelings when Bill called me. And I said something to the effect of, I'd love to work with you again, but he described it to me, as I recall, as a tiny shunt. And I said, man, this is a late stage procedure, small niche market. I don't know that you can build value as a company. And Bill said, why don't you just come out, take a look, see if you like it. If not, you can give us some ideas. So I came out and I saw the size of the device. And like I like to say, like I told my football coach in college, I may be small, but I'm slow. And I got it. And immediately an epiphany came into my mind that this could revolutionize glaucoma. We could change the paradigm with this singular injection therapy and liberate patients from a consignment to topical medications. And so I became convinced that this is something that I should do and dedicate my time towards, and now it's been 20 years later.
All right, so Gil, kind of for you, almost similar to Bill, why did you decide to invest? When was the investment for you? When and why?
Well, we invested, my venture fund is InterWest Partners, and we invested in 2007, which is actually an important thing to note, because the company, as you know, was started much earlier. And my main reason for investing in the company is it's a privilege as an investor to invest between people that you know, like, and respect. And what could be better than coming in with Tom and Bill. And a quick story, my summer job at business school was working for Bill. He was brave enough to hire me. And that's where I met Tom. And we were younger men back then and formed a great friendship ever since then, and had kept in touch. And he told me when he went to the company, I said, yeah, this is high risk, but you should do it. And then he's like, well, are you going to invest? And I said, well, maybe, I don't know. And what was interesting for InterWest, we had a big success with Intralays, one of Bill's investments. And so we were very bullish on ophthalmology. But around in the mid-2000s, we were thinking to go a little later stage because we were seeing how long it could take for some of these big projects. We love first of kind, just like this, new market, blank canvas, unbelievable team. But it actually was a little uncomfortable that I wanted to invest behind Tom, but we thought it was going to take a little longer. So we came in a later round after Bill and some other investors were in it, thinking that, oh, within 2 or 3 years, this is going to be approved, it's all going to be great, and we know what happened in the rest of the story. But so it was a highly attractive deal. The timing for us was a little bit challenging, and that's why we came in a little later.
So Chris, you made the fatal mistake of leaving a great company led by an unbelievable CEO. That was me. And
Jesse, can you remind me of that?
Huh?
Can you remind me of who that was?
Yeah, that was me. And I think the rumor is that Ron Bach told you to leave. But knowing that, putting that to the side, you did take a risk. You were doing extremely well at AMO, and then obviously you're going to a smaller company. Talk to me about that journey.
Well, I'd become familiar with Transcend Medical and knew what they were doing, and I thought it was an interesting concept, and I decided to call Tom, an acquaintance of mine from the Allergan days, and asked him about it and if he would meet with me to discuss it. And we met at lunch, and by the end of that lunch, he had offered me a job.
Did I miss that call, Tom, to me? Did I miss that call?
And candidly, I got intrigued by the vision and Tom. Glaucoma, there really hadn't been much going on. I knew about Transcend. Then I was privy to the portfolio that Tom was developing. I loved his vision. I was enthusiastic about it, and I trusted him. And in the end, it was a decision that I made with my heart and not necessarily with my head, because at the time I took a pretty significant pay cut, and it was hard. I had 4 young children living in California, never easy, and I had a great personal relationship with you. But what intrigued me was creating a category. At that time, I forget how old I was, maybe 40.
What year was this?
This was 08, so I was 48 years old. And it was time, I felt, to explore my entrepreneurial spirit. I liked the idea of creating a category, and I really, really liked the idea of creating my own commercial team. I had a vision for what I wanted to do, and Tom gave me the runway to do that. So to this day, 15 years later, it's the best business decision that I ever made.
And a real quick thing, if I could, I remember interviewing Chris, and I would say interviewing with Chris, I felt like it was an interview for me. Could this interview be good enough that he would still join the company? Because it was amazing that a company at a pretty early stage could get someone like Chris, and he was meeting all the board members, and I remember thinking, I hope I don't blow this interview, because if we can't hire Chris because of me, Tom will kill me. So it showed the importance of how A people attract A people, and I think that's a really key thing about building a company.
So David, you joined in an early stage. When was it, and what was the attraction, and what kind of got you the impetus of the vision of Glaukos?
So I joined I started sort of consulting with Olav and Versant in the year 2000. I just left Allergan after 10 years, and was starting a little consulting business, and they gave me a call, and they wanted some help looking at the design, just throwing darts at it, figuring out why it wouldn't work, that kind of thing, looking at manufacturing, how might we engineer the device, design it, manufacture it, is it even possible, those kind of things. And the more we looked at it, and the more of those questions kept getting answered, yes, you know, we passed this gate, we passed that gate, we can do this, we can do that, whether it's FDA approval or surgical facility or design of the product. I kind of started to get intrigued, and we still hadn't started the company yet, but in January of 2001, I think Olaf put in about 100,000, got us going. We picked up a little space up there in Laguna Hills, borrowed some tables and chairs, and started going. And December that year, we had our first implant in humans. So it was a good ride for that first year. I think we had visions of treating glaucoma and coming up with an alternate way to treat it, transforming glaucoma treatment. And we had our kind of sights on drugs and the toxicity with topical drugs and the preservatives, and we wanted to do something about that, as well as the trabeculectomy. And we felt like we had a pretty good alternative to both of those treatments.
So let me ask a question to all of you, and I'll start with you, Bill. You know, you're all smiling now because of the success that you're incurring and continuing, but there were probably a lot of days when there were not smiles. There was maybe stomach flu activity going on. So I'd like to understand, what were the salient points that made you continue to persevere through it? So I'm just going to go right down the road. Bill?
Yeah, some of the challenging times early was trying to get the technology honestly reduced to shape and size, and then start to work on the actual surgical insertion. And one of the dilemmas we had was, as a standalone procedure, would either the surgeons or the FDA allow us to poke, you know, a hole in the eye and put a piece of metal in there for glaucoma. And one of the positive aha moments, David was giving some demonstrations to several surgeons to get feedback. Dick Lindstrom had come down at my invitation, and he was sitting there, you know, and we had cadaver eyes, so it was a real procedure. And in that conversation, Dick said, well, we should do this during cataract surgery because the eye's already open, and this and that. And it rung the bell. So that positive moment changed our path very materially. And here we are a couple of decades later, you know, now going into standalone procedures, which was the original concept before Dick had that beautiful synthetic idea to do it in a combined procedure.
Before, Tommy, you answer, I think it's relevant for all of you. If you're in this stage, listen to what's occurred, because many of you are probably in that stage of where Bill was just describing and what Tom's going to do. So try to relate it to your experience. Tom?
Yeah, so you're asking about near-death experiences.
Yeah, and the resiliency and
Yeah.
that you increment, but what were the salient points?
So, well, I'll tell you, one of the most salient and searing near-death experience for us, I think, was our PMA panel. So for those of you who tuned in at the time, it'd be an understatement to say that we had just a colossally disastrous morning. And most people would have said, there's no way this company is going to get an advocation to continue. And I think that's the feeling that we had as well. So I remember at halftime, I was looking for consolation. So I went to an outside regulatory consultant who's very experienced in the area, and I was looking for a pep talk. And what I expected her to say was, look, this happens all the time, Tom. You get beat up in the first session. The afternoon we'll pick it up, momentum will change, and you'll see. So I went to her and I said, well, what do you think? And she said, what do you mean, what do I think? We're going to get killed. So what I will tell you is the afternoon turned, the worm turned in our favor. We had a couple of really stalwart advocates, Eve Higginbotham and Ann Coleman, who convinced a panel of largely corneal specialists that this was a product that could add considerable value to clinicians moving forward. and we ended up getting a near unanimous avocation at the end.
Chris?
Well, I would say the FDA panel was definitely the most excruciating of those events. But then after that, we didn't hear for 18 months? Yeah. And I remember going to ASCRS meetings and AO meetings and running into people that I knew and then putting their hand on my shoulder and go, how are you doing? That empathy of, you made a bad choice and, you know, you're a good guy and I hope it works out for you. And that went on for a long time. I mean, the panel meeting was in...
It was 2010 in June, and we didn't get approval for 2 years.
2 years. So those were a long 2 years. And I remember all those looks and all those empathetic comments made to me, and so it was quite a thing when we got approval.
Dave?
There's been a couple. I'd say the first one was in the very early stage when we were trying to figure out what the product was going to look like and how we were going to do the surgery, and there were some disagreements between the team that was running the company and the management we had at the time, and I think that prompted the call to Bill, which led to Bill's call to Tom. So that was a pretty salient moment because we were pretty seriously thinking about, there was 3 of us, pretty seriously thinking about leaving. We had already put our first implant in, and it was not going well. They wanted to completely change the direction. It had to do with safety. I won't get into the details of it, but that was one point. And then, yeah, definitely the panel meeting. And I'd say, you know, something more current. It probably wasn't a near-death experience, but COVID was no picnic for us. Yeah. We were a complete elective procedure, and those pretty much completely stopped for several months. And we had to take some pretty austere put some pretty austere things in place to get through that.
So that's an interesting point. At that time, you were still very successful, yet it still was a salient point. So even successful companies face. So you're still facing challenges. It's not like you're past it, but you obviously have risen from the early challenges. Gil?
Just a quick one on this. I want to build on this FDA thing. I was at the panel meeting. I always try to go to these panels, and it's amazing the amount of preparation that the team has to go through and the stresses. And of course, you know, as a board member investor, I'm not playing the game. I'm up in the stands, and even then it's stressful as an investor because you just don't know what's coming out. Coming out of that meeting, it was pretty obvious it wasn't the greatest meeting, although we did get an approval. The team came out of there. They were obviously, you know, devastated by it, but they just jumped back up, and I think our theme song at the beginning here, "Won't Back Down," is so emblematic of Tom and Chris and Dave and the whole team here. So they powered forward. A key factor in this was the investor syndicate. So we then could see it was going to take a lot more, and the company at that time I don't think was funded to anticipate how long we were going to go. There wasn't a moment of hesitation from anyone in that group. In fact, some people were saying we want to put in more than our pro rata share, which speaks to the strength of the team and the confidence that everyone had that they would end up ultimately being successful. And many companies fail at exactly that point where the investors might give up prematurely or the team might not quite be strong enough to do it. In this case, there wasn't a shadow of a doubt, and it was obviously proven to be the right decision.
So I'd like Tom Samuelson, Joe Gilliam, and Reza to come up, but let me ask you a question, Tommy. So let's talk about those salient moments. How candid were you with the organization?
Yeah, I've got one other. I would put this in the category of either, you mentioned earlier, stomach flu or maybe long COVID, okay? We had a American Glaucoma Society meeting that took place in Dana Point. And we had a glaucoma specialist who got up and disparaged our data from the podium. And then they went to the clickers, to the panel, and said, how many of you would want to use this device? This is pre-commercialization. And the numbers came back that something like 14 or 15% of glaucoma specialists said they were interested in using the iStent. So we just had a Series D raise, So I took a considerable portion of those funds and I put my senior team in psychotherapy and grief counseling for the next 6 months. And it was amazing. We launched in 2012. In the year 2013, Tom Samuelson stood up at the same session, gave the data on iStent and went to the clickers and said, how many of you either are using the product today or plan to use it in the next year? The numbers came back completely reversed. I think it was 85% were willing to try or already had, and 14 or 15% said no interest. So in 3 short years, we had changed the whole paradigm of how MIGS was viewed.
So that's a great bridge to you, Tom. Tom, you're technically not part of this team, but you're part of the journey. So, and you've had an opportunity to see a lot of companies at various stages. What was that aha moment for you as one of the top surgeons to sit there and go, this is going to work?
It certainly took a while to get the confidence of the glaucoma community for sure. And it took a completely different way of thinking because everyone wanted the efficacy that we got with traditional glaucoma surgery. And we were never going to demonstrate that degree of efficacy. And the two most difficult audiences that I've had to present this data to was the panel meeting. I had the privilege of presenting the data to the FDA panel, and it was as precarious as these guys described. Maybe not quite as much for me because I had a day job, but this was their company. It was just striking to me how what's become a 2.4 billion market cap now, or whatever they may be, how precarious their existence was at that moment and at the time that Tom was talking about with the AGS, because we had to change the way that people thought about glaucoma surgery. We aren't going to get the efficacy. I remember Jeff Wells sharing with me that, you know, okay, here's the data. I want you to think about this. We reduced medicines by a half a medication. And I thought, a half a medication? And then I got to thinking, okay, if you have a trial, 2 arms, and you have 100 patients in each arm, and one arm, everybody's on a medicine, and the other arm, you got half off their medicine, maybe 50 are on one drug and 50 are on no drugs. That's terrific. You know, you took half the people and got them off their medications. But it took that way of thinking and that, you know, we're not as efficacious, but we're incredibly safe. And the panel got it by the afternoon, thanks to Eve and Ann Coleman, and just continuing to pound that safety matters. You can have a procedure that doesn't work as well, but you're not putting your eye at risk, and that is really valuable, and it's launched the entire MIGS market. So those are my aha moments that you just have to think about it differently.
So Joe, I'm going to ask you pre-Glaukos, because we all have known each other because you were with JP Morgan. So you're sitting there, you knew the company extremely well. You, at that time, I don't think so, but you weren't sure what, you know, you're going to join them or not. What was that special moment when you just looked at the company as one of the lead bankers? What was that? What was the thought process there?
You mean the context of when I decided to join?
No, right before you even decided to join, you were watching the journey, and you were measuring it, and you were managing it.
Well, I think in many ways the two are related. It was also ultimately the reason why I joined. You know, one of the benefits of being in that part of my career was I got to work with a lot of different companies, get to know a lot of different CEOs, get to know a lot of different boards and situations. And one of the things that kept drawing me back to Glaukos and ultimately drew me back to Glaukos in a more permanent fashion was just the amount of investment that they had made early on in the pipeline and the future generations, right? I had seen so many companies over the course of my career that had put all their eggs in that first product basket for good reason. Capital is difficult to come by, et cetera. And for me, in thinking about, you know, my career and thinking about this company, it was unique in how much capital and how much time and effort they had put behind really developing Generation 2 and Generation 3 and Generation 4. And I think now as a company, we know how long and difficult that journey can be to bringing products to market. We're finally at the place where we're starting to see some of those come and the portfolio really expand. And that was always a part of it. And we took Glaukos on the road as an IPO. It was, at the time, the most successful IPO I'd ever been a part of, and one of the most successful IPOs in healthcare history at the time, right? And a big part of that was people really saw the logic behind the way the ramp was going to work, but then they knew there was more behind that that was going to drive the business forward for the next decade plus.
So I'm going to come back to that, but I want to talk, the point here is courage. So now, here's another courageous move. We're going to contact Reza and in something that's not even directly related. So I'm going to go to Reza first. So Reza, you knew Glaukos. You've obviously been in the space for many years. Tell me about that journey of how Tom Burns, the head of Glaukos, is calling you and saying, hey, how about we do something together?
Yeah, it's. I think one thing that comes from this conversation is these are long journeys, but more than that, the relations many times are built even before you know. So I knew Tom before I had joined Avedro. I knew Chris. I knew Joe. I worked with Gil. I knew Bill, and even competed with, but with respect. So these relations are way before. I remember when I joined Avedro, that's for another conversation, we had some commercial challenges and I knew Chris. And I would call him and ask questions and he was generous, answer questions. And we had one rule at Avedro, don't touch any employee from Glaukos. Because Chris was so nice each time I called him. I mean, they would come and say, Reza, we have found this candidate, perfect. You cannot touch Glaukos. So these are way before any of this started. So I had approached Bill and Tom to join our board. Bill was busy and Tom joined our board. Quite frankly, the story, he was a great board member. One day he called me and started saying, Reza, you're doing a great job. Company is doing well. So I said, is he quitting? Why is he telling me? I thought, why is he quitting? Everything is going so well. And he's saying all the good things about Avedro. And at the end, he told me he wants to acquire the company. I said, okay, good, because I thought he wanted to quit. So that was and quite frankly, good acquisitions or any good decision is when it's good for the employees, good for the shareholders, good for the customer. And in this case, it checked all the boxes. Many of our employees, in fact, got better jobs after the acquisition. They got inside the Glaukos. Our customers suddenly, they had access to, our customers were their customers, but they were way ahead of us, so they could immediately bring our product to many surgeons. And the price they paid was fair to the shareholders. So all of those made sense. The only difficulty is once transaction starts, then you're not allowed to talk anymore. So that was the premises.
So just quickly, Tom and Bill, and you too, Gil, this is 2019. So the company's still doing well, but it's growing, yet you're now going to kind of go a little, I don't want to use the term off course, but what was that board discussion about Avedro?
Well, one of the things that we aspire to do is grow leaders in our space. And there's a category that's referred to as a mid-tier leader, and we'll take the field of ophthalmology. And we don't have many mid-tier leaders. We have a lot of startups, and we have several global leaders, okay? So there's an opportunity and a need here. And an aspiration that Tom and I and others had is that we're not just going to be a one product, one and done. So we began to build pipeline, and we were very strategic about how much we said. We never talked about the power of our pipeline until we were confident. Okay, so we didn't just signal to others, including the street, that okay, we're putting money in the pipeline. And then we had the concept that let's own the front of the eye. Okay, here's glaucoma, it's anterior segment. There are other conversations that are now public that we were having about the back of the eye. And so it was not just, okay, it's just glaucoma and it's just metal. Okay, what else can we do? And so Avedro was coming at a really interesting time for both companies, where synergy could could drive value creation.
Tom or Gil, go ahead.
Or,
Gil.
yeah, you know, this combination was, I think, one of the most synergistic, really great deals. I was completely oblivious to it. I was on the board.
You were on both, that's right.
companies. And it was the best kept secret I've ever seen in a board, or it tells you how little attention I pay in board meetings. I knew Tom from the beginning, and the whole team, incredibly strategic. It was a one product company from the outside, but inside, it was the best presentation of developing a pipeline across all of ophthalmology I've ever seen in my career, and continues to be. But I didn't connect the dots that Avedro might be somewhere on there. And Tom was on the board. And by the way, I got the same phone call. I'll never forget, I was on vacation with my family in Hawaii in spring break, and Tom calls me up and tells me, boy, thank you for getting me involved in Avedro. It's been such a great company. And I'm thinking, he's quitting the board. He doesn't want to travel to Boston. And then he tells me he wants to buy the company. And by the way, that means I have to step off both boards, and this is the last I'm going to hear about anything. So it's the M&A deal I probably had the least ever to deal with, but yet ended up being great. And I think it also shows really good corporate governance. And I think this is very important in doing M&A, is to make sure that there's arm's length discussions. And this one, I think, really is exhibit A for how to do it completely right.
And before you answer, Tom, that's an excellent point, because probably, I know, Bill, you have, I have, Gil, you're sometimes on the boards of both companies, and it's very difficult. You're pulled off of both, and you're kind of rooting for it behind the scenes from that perspective. Tommy, anything to add?
I was just going to say that our whole DNA is to create new markets. So you've seen that. We've created the MIGS marketplace globally. We're creating this intracameral drug delivery space with iDose. We're creating a transdermal drug delivery space with Intratus. And we're looking for long-term small molecules for the treatment of retina. I'd been on the board. I was really impressed with what Reza had created with Gil. And I became enamored that this could be a platform for a whole new marketplace that we could develop and have contingencies well beyond keratoconus. But I did like the fact that a single application of a topical drop could arrest a sight-threatening disease in these poor kids that were developing keratoconus. And that got me intrigued and wanted me in the space. And I'm very, very happy that we've gone there.
So, Joe, build off of that. We'll go first is the mantra. What does that mean?
Well, I think you're hearing a lot of it, right? It's a pioneering mindset at its core. But what does that really mean inside of our four walls? I think it's a commitment to moving fast, and it's a commitment to exploring the unknown. And when you're entering into these new markets, so often you don't know the regulatory path. You don't know the reimbursement path, and let alone how you're going to commercialize it and teach and educate as you try to build it. And you've heard flavors of that throughout the conversation here. And I think beyond that, you have to be willing to adjust. You're going to learn as you go along, and you have to move quickly in that adjustment. That's not always easy either. And most extreme version of that is you've got to be willing to fail. And I think back to over my career, I've heard a lot of corporate leaders say those words, but I think it's a whole different thing to really live it. And a lot of credit goes to Tom in the context of how he thinks about that every day and how he instills that in us, to really think about that in terms of people decisions and in terms of just strategic and small decisions to larger ones, right? How do we continue to really stay nimble as we move through this? Because there isn't always a playbook. In fact, most of the time for our products, there was no playbook. And it creates a little different DNA. And so I think that holistically, plus what you've heard, is really what we mean by in terms of we'll go first.
So, Tom, I'm going to let you summarize, take us home. But, a lot of the team members you have, I had the luxury of working with Jane Rady, Diane Biagianti, Sherry Aronson, and they all tell me what a great culture that you've all and the team has created. So take us on home from the beginning now through today. How's the culture changed, or has it changed?
Well, I think the culture has, from the very beginning, been spirited, innovative, and I believe that we carry ourselves with a sense of humility throughout the organization. A lot of self-deprecation, a lot of fun. We don't take ourselves entirely seriously, and yet we're very serious about what we develop. What I will tell you is the keys that I see it to our success are self-evident. First, I've had the good fortune of working with a brilliant set of people. You see them up here on stage. You've seen a few others today, Tomas, Cody, and we've had many top-flight female executives like Jane Rady, like Diane Biagianti, like Michelle Allegretto, like Gabriella CK. Those are the people that conceived, developed, and created this global MIGS marketplace. And to whatever success we've had, they are the ones that deserve the credit. And I will tell you, I also have been blessed with a board that has been both savvy, seasoned, but most important, patient. So when you talk about how these things work, when Bill and I first got together, we soft-circled the business in 2002, said, well, this is probably a 5 to 7 year journey for an exit, and we'll be on to our next thing. And how good our prognostication was, right? We're here 20 years later in a very different mindset. But during that time, I have been so blessed. The board has been unfailingly supportive and never lost confidence, where I think a lot of boards may have. And then finally, I hope there are some clinicians in the audience, because for those of you who look back at us and remember when we were a nothing company, we swam against the tide of skepticism, indifference, ambivalence, and sometimes outright resistance. And it was the ophthalmic community and some really key people that advocated for us fully, that got on planes and went to Armenia to do clinical studies. And I think that's the reason that we're here today. I will say one final thing. Any company that succeeds has to have a good measure of good luck, good timing, and I'd like to believe in some cases some divine intervention. And I think we had all three that got us where we are today.
Well, team, congratulations. I think, Gil, your idea of creating this was a fantastic one. I don't know how the next one's going to be, but I have to tell you, you all did a fantastic job. Thank you.